Hey guys, this is Khavrion here with another battle report. This is for round 2 of Operation Rising Sun, a tabletop simulator team campaign league by Vol SC. I will be playing the Onyx contact force, trying to deal with some pesky JSA who are trying to cause problems on our peaceful operation to bring peace to the planet. As I've already announced, the goal of the combined army in this particular campaign is to make sure the humans stay disunified. So as long as there are not perfectly even scores among all the human factions at the end of the game, we will be declaring this a victory. That said, we're also trying to do some scoring for ourselves, if for no other reason than it's sort of what's requested. So I did try to win this game, and we will get to see how that goes. The mission was Unmasking. In Unmasking, there are 3 civilians scattered about the board per side. There are 3 consoles in the middle. And what you have to do is you have to run a hacker or other specialist up to the console, push the button, and when you push the button, you get to ask if one of the 3 targets is the actual targets you have to kill, or if it's a decoy. The idea is that there's actually one designated target that you're trying to assassinate, and then the 2 decoys are ones that are trying to protect said person. Scoring is essentially split 50-50 between did you kill the actual right designated target and everything else. There are 3 points for killing the enemy designated target, 2 points for keeping your own guy alive. So if your opponent kills your guy, you lose 2, they gain 3. Then there are 2 points for activating more consoles than your opponent. They're in the middle. Then there's 1 point each for the 2 decoys if you kill them, and then there's 1 point for killing more decoys. So 5 points wrapped up in keeping your own guy alive and killing theirs, 5 points associated with the decoys and the consoles. I actually really like this mission. It's one of my favorites in ITS 13. I don't like it as much as Supplies, which I think is very much the classic game of infiNity. But I do think it has a fair balance of button pushing and strategically defending your deployment zone and that sort of thing. In fact, just about the only thing that I really don't like about the mission is that if you have impersonators, you can kind of trivialize the mission. If you get to go first with an impersonator, you can run up and push the 3 consoles more or less unopposed because of an exclusion zone. Meanwhile, your impersonators can start on the other side of the map, and they can then go find the correct target who's now been revealed and just kill them. And given that I was up against JSA, I was worried that my opponent would be doing something similar with a ninja. However, this particular quirk aside, I still do really care for the mission. I think it's really good. I think it has some balance between going first and going second. If you go second, you know what you have to do, and also you have an advantage for controlling the consoles. Meanwhile, if you get to go first, you get first pick at the consoles, and maybe you can kill a target before the opponent has moved into the midfield. I will say I preferred the N3 version of this mission. In N3, there were 2 points all wrapped up with having a data tracker kill the enemy designated target. So you had fewer points associated with just killing the designated target, and that helped a little bit with the impersonator problem. I actually personally think the mission would be even better if there weren't, just 5 points wrapped up in actually killing the correct designated target. Because there are games where, you push 2 buttons and you just can't guess the right target. And if you can't guess the right target, that's half the points down the drain. But even so, I like the mission. I think it's a good mission. I think it's fairly balanced. And I'm happy to play it. The mission also fits pretty well with the Blender Boys list that I've been running. This is a limited insertion Onyx contact force list, sort of inspired by the big boy list in Steel Phalanx that you guys know that I love. The primary beefiness of this list comes from a Harris between an Umbra Samaritan, Norkius, and the Zeodron, which is a tag. The link is 6'2", so it's fairly fast. It has NCO in Norkius and the tactical awareness from the Zeodron. And it's fairly good in terms of close-range gunfighting. The K1 Marksman Rifle really puts the hurt on anything relying on armor. The Plasma Carbine and the Umbra Samaritan is pretty damaging. And of course, if you can get into CC, you can just eat things and slurp them up. It's not anywhere near the levels of effectiveness of the big boy in Omatarkos, but I still really like it. The thing that I like about this, though, is that Norkius is a really good piece, but he wants to be brought forward. And this list allows you to bring him forward while spending orders gunfighting or doing something with the Zeodron that's useful. Otherwise, I find that Norkius spends a lot of time running around just by himself, and he doesn't necessarily accomplish everything that he needs to accomplish. Incidentally, that's also why he's not the killer hacker profile, because he can't go into Cybermask while he's in the Harris. So this is Blender Boys, but it's not the first iteration. The first iteration had an overdrawn, but this version replaces the overdrawn with the ability to form a Harris of 2 Suryats, the Lieutenant +1 order HMG, who is giving his orders to Norkius, the Multispectral Visor level 1 Suryat with heavy rocket launcher, and Kernow, who is a plasma rifle and is wildcard. This Harris is worth considering because it's basically what does a ton of work in this particular game. The Burst 5 BS-13 HMG on the Suryat is basically exactly as good as the Overdrawn at winning face-to-faces. It doesn't have the same damage code, it doesn't have AP, but in terms of actually just winning the face-to-face, it is literally exactly the same. Meanwhile, the Suryat with Heavy Rocket Launcher and Multi-Spectral Visor level 1 is immune to AP, has Armor 4, which is pretty decent, 2 wounds, which is pretty good, and the most important thing against JSA and Ariadna and everything else is he can see through smoke. So that dude is going to be particularly important if I have to go second, and I just don't want smoke to be dumped on my head and get murdered. Kurnow was chosen because he's basically the only wild card that can fit into this list, but I think he is a good fit. His plasma rifle is decent, his pitcher gives me more ways to drop pitchers on the opponent's side of the board and rain missiles on their head, and of course he is a specialist and killer hacker himself, and he has white noise, and the white noise is kind of nice considering that this list doesn't really have any other smoke. Other than that, you have the T-Drone for dropping missiles, 2 Icadrons, which I think are the best baggage bot in infiNity by far, and then you have Bit and Kiss. Bit and Kiss are phenomenal. They're really good hackers. They start by filling your deployment zone with repeaters, and Kiss can kind of be like a warcore just kind of standing there on arrow in case something bad happens. So I crafted this list after some practice games showed that the original version of Blender Boys wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, and I've played this list a couple of times, and it seems to be working for me pretty well. It ain't Steel Phalanx Big Boys, but it's pretty darn fun, and if you really want to sort of have the feeling of running around a tag with lots and lots of orders, I think this is satisfying. So yeah, that's my list. Here is something like my opponent's list. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think you've got the big pieces here. First off, you'll notice that the groups are split 7 and 6. That definitely was the case. Next, notice there is a Ninja Killer Hacker in both groups. This is kind of an interesting inclusion. The Ninja Killer Hacker is obviously nice in Unmasking because he can run up and push the buttons. Moreover, being in hidden deployment, I can't, counter deploy to stop him from pushing those buttons. But it does mean that there are 2 orders that are off the board, so my opponent won't be able to spend them, unless he wants to spend them on those ninjas. Also, as we were talking at the beginning of this video, something like an Oniwaban or Shinobu can just infiltrate onto my side of the board and use that starting deployment to really trivialize killing my designated target. Now, that infiltration can fail, but I still think that the shot at it working is pretty darn effective, and I'm not sure that I would have just not gone with it. I'm not a JSA player, of course, so I don't really know, but it's just something to think about. And these Ninja Killer Hackers are not going to be as effective as they need to be throughout the course of the game, so I figured I'd bring it up. Other than that, he has a 3-man core with 2 Tankos with Flaming Spears and a Damaru. Then in the other combat group, he has a Harris with a Tanko, Miyamoto Musashi, and a Kempe Chain of Command wildcarding in. I don't know if the Miyamoto Musashi Harris is good, but if you're going to run it, I think this is not a bad way of actually running it. The Tanko has an SMG, so it can gunfight just a little bit. The Kempe is a specialist, and Miyamoto Musashi is a CC monster, so he's got that going for him too. Then there is the Kiroshi Rider in one of the groups. This is a bike who is also a forward observer and has some smoke, and Yojimbo, who is not a specialist, but he does have smoke. Yojimbo is an excellent piece, and the Kiroshi Rider is something that a lot of JSA players seem to really enjoy taking. I personally don't because I don't know how to use bikes, but people seem to like it a lot. Then there are 2 Ryukin. These Ryukin are a phenomenal piece for this particular mission. They have Mimetism -6, they have heavy rocket launchers, they have single-use marker state, and I think they also have Mine Layer. These are going to be an incredibly defensive piece. I'll have to discover them, which is incredibly unreliable. Then I'll have to kill them, which is exceedingly dangerous. Both the heavy rocket launcher and the HMG have extremely good odds at killing these guys, but it's definitely still not something that I'm excited to do. And indeed, I don't deal with them. They stay a problem for the whole game, and so that's great for them. The only other thing worth mentioning is because this is a narrative event, we get a campaign correspondent. This is basically a loser that does not even generate an order, but he shows up in one of the 2 combat groups, and your team captain can give him gear, and then he can become interesting and run around and try to do stuff. He's still not good, but he can, do nothing. My opponent's campaign correspondent was given a bike, a hacking device, and a flash pulse, which is an extremely useful thing for this particular mission. The bike and the hacking device basically mean that the campaign correspondent can zip around and push the buttons in the center very, very efficiently. My campaign correspondent, meanwhile, was equipped with an explosive close combat weapon, a medikit, because I don't actually have any doctors in my list, and cyber mines or something. So I didn't have great gear. My opponent did have good gear, but this is a team thing. You only have so much gear that you got to spread around. So it does, it kind of makes sense. Also, I'd like to again stress the camp cores are basically not that impactful on the game. It's just kind of a little fun thing that your team can have. So that's my opponent's list. Here is the map. It is using the new Blender Vol SC assets. And if you compare this map with the other map, you'll see the way in which allowing the textures to change can allow these assets to be used in a totally different thematic map, even though they're the same assets. So you see the same buildings, for example, over here, the same bridges over here, but they're themed so that they have all this moss growing on them, as opposed to the spaceship that they were last time. That said, these bridges are going to prove to be very annoying in terms of moving under them and seeing through them and all that stuff. We actually, remove this bridge so we can move under it and then forget about it, which ends up having a lot of long-range gunfights through here where you probably couldn't even see each other. My opponent and I, once we realized this, were both like, whoops, we're just going to play it. We're just going to keep playing it that way. But it is to say these bridges were kind of annoying, and I guess I'd rather, not have them be annoying in the way they were for this game. They look good, but they're hard to move around in, and we turned them off so that we could move under them, and then we forgot about them. In terms of actual strategy, the two deployment zones are fairly equivalent. My opponent won the dice roll and chose to go first, so I had to choose which one I wanted my opponent to have. And I noticed that there was an alley that basically runs between these two consoles. And what that means is that my opponent is going to have essentially unassailable access to these two consoles by taking this guy, for example, running up to here, push button, run over here, and push button. And I chose to give this to my opponent. My thinking here is that if my opponent spends his whole turn running around and pushing buttons and then kills my designated target, he's not breaking the back of my list, he's not reducing my order pool. I was extremely worried that something like Shinobu was going to start right next to my link, throw smoke, and then kill my lieutenant, kill everything else, and then game over for me. I do have that Suryat heavy rocket launcher, but it's not everything that it needs to be, and when you're running a limited insertion list, being able to bunker down really safely is important. So I intentionally gave my opponent ways that he could complete the mission by trying to push buttons that wouldn't be attacking me on the first turn of the game. And given that is basically what happened, I'd say the strategy worked. To go over this deployment, you have the Kiroshi Rider here, Yojimbo here, the Miyamoto Musashi Harris is there, one Ryukin here watching this console, one Ryukin here watching this console and this console. The two stacking means there's not a shadow that I can even hide behind there. You have the core over here. This is the Tanko Flammenspier. That's the Dumaru. Pangling is standing there. And then down here is the campaign correspondent, the hacking device motorcycle guy, Flash Pulse bot. And I don't remember exactly where the ninjas were. I think one was right here and one was right here. Meanwhile, this is my deployment. Because I'm running a limited insertion combat group thing, I chose my favorite strategy and just more or less completely refused this flank. I castled up almost everybody over here. The only exception is I put the T-drone missile launcher way over there in the corner. This will get the T-drone killed. Yojimbo is just able to zip up and kill it. I do actually have some long-range arrows over here, but I don't know, I just don't hit or something like that. However, if he's running over here to kill the T-drone, he's not running over here, to kill everything else. I had withheld Bit and Kiss, and what I was planning on doing, I have my Suryat Lieutenant here in this corner, and if I had to, I would put Bit's repeater right here, basically body blocking so that you can't actually get into close combat with my Lieutenant. But my opponent didn't make any infiltration rolls, so I knew there was no Shinobu, so I didn't bother doing that. Instead, I have Lieutenant here. My campaign correspondent is standing up there, just being cheeky. Suryat heavy rocket launcher there, Kurnow there. Bit is there. Kiss is standing up here being a war core. Ikadron, they're trying to get some decent hacking coverage. Bit's repeater is right there to close the hacking loop. This is an Umbra Samaritan, flash pulsing. He's got a long range left-right arrow. He can see right down there with that flash pulse. The Zeodron is right there. He can also see down that lane, but he also sees up here. And then Norkius is... I don't remember where Norkius is, but maybe he's like over there. I don't remember. Oh, Norkius is probably right here, and then the Ikadron is over there. In terms of HVTs, I had 3 of them. I had one right here, and then I had 2 standing next to each other there and there. This was the real one, the one that was hiding right there. That arrow doesn't really point to it. It's in this little U of buildings. As for my opponent's HVTs, he has one here, and one here. Notably, if I can get a gun around to this flank, I can just see all 3 of them, and that will be relevant on the last turn of the game. I will use that long-range fire lane to shoot at the middle HVT, which turns out to be the real one. So yeah, let's go ahead and start off the game. If you recall, my plan is to let him push buttons and let him spend his orders doing that thing. He has 7 orders in one group and 6 orders in the second group or something like that. -1 each for the ninjas or something. I don't exactly remember. But the point is, I do in fact choose to strip 1 order from each of the 2 groups. So neither of the 2 groups is really going to be able to do an alpha strike, but they will be able to push a lot of buttons. He takes his Kiroshi Rider Lieutenant, runs up to that one, pushes it on a single go, runs over to that one, pushes it on a single go. He was going to go this way, but there is a forest in the way, so he runs all the way around here, fails this one once, but then pushes it on the second try as he runs around here, and then with his last order, he manages to kill my decoy who's standing right there. So using only 1 combat group's orders, he has managed to push all 3 buttons, reveal all 3 of the targets, and kill the decoy. He then decides to take Yojimbo, who's standing right here, and he just runs Yojimbo all the way up this way to try to kill the missile bot. I think he's probably had some bad experiences with missiles in the past. No complaints there. We all have bad experiences with missiles in the past. And he is willing to leave Yojimbo in this kind of awkward position in order to take care of the missile bot. I actually do get 2 shots on him as he goes by. I hit, I think once or twice with the Suryat heavy rocket launcher as he runs past. I'm on -9, so these are on 4s, but there's 2 dice. Maybe one will hit, but you know, he tanks it. No big deal. And of course, the missile launcher bot is down. Which means that here's how things look at the start of my first turn. I've only lost 1 order, but my opponent has pushed all the buttons and I've got a lot of stuff to do. I noticed that this Kiroshi Rider is out of position. I'd really like to kill Yojimbo as well, because if I can get rid of all this smoke, that'll be great. And I'm thinking that the tool for this job is going to be to take the Suryat, Kurnow, and the other Suryat and just kind of run here through to the middle. Once I get through to the middle, I will have to shoot this Tanko with the Flammenspier. I may also be able to hit some rockets onto this Pangling. Pangling's standing for some reason. I asked my opponent if he wanted to be standing. I said, are you sure you don't want to be prone? The Pangling was standing. It turns out that it worked out okay, but the Pangling was standing, so I was going to just dump some rockets into that. And then I was also going to, be able to shoot the Kiroshi Rider over here. Having done all that, I also wanted to leave my Suryat Lieutenant into silhouette contact with my real target. I would then have 2 lieutenant orders with which to synchronize the Suryat to the real target, and then I'd spend whatever orders I had left running my own target to safety. Him being revealed means that he's super vulnerable. I want to get him out of there. That is the plan. Unfortunately, the execution is a little bit bad. I'm playing this game on a weeknight, and I know that I'm kind of dumb on weeknights. And as evidence for being kind of dumb on weeknights, both my opponent and I just forgot that this bridge was right here. It completely blocks the ARO from this Tanko, and we just forgot. That having been said, the way that I chose these gunfights is a mistake, and I want to talk about why it was a mistake. What I did is I took my Harris, ran it out here, and then took almost every single gunfight with the Suryat heavy rocket launcher. I think I spent 1 order HMGing this Tanko with the Flammenspier because I wanted to have burst 5 against his burst 2. But everything else was spent using the heavy rocket launcher, in particular to shoot at this Kiroshi Rider over here. And the Kiroshi Rider was able to tank or dodge 2 or 3 orders before going down. On the one hand, that's a little bit of bad luck. On the other hand, I should have been using the HMG and not the HRL. The point that I'd like to stress is it's very easy to have these situations where you're favored to win the face-to-face roll and you're favored to wound if you hit, but you're not that favored. The odds of failing to wound, of failing to hit, of failing to win the face-to-face are in the 10 to 20 to 30% range, and it's not all that unlikely that you're going to fail. I was thinking that the mimetism meant that the MSV-1 heavy rocket launcher wouldn't be that bad, but honestly what I should have done is just use the HMG and blast that guy away. And the lesson here is that just because you are favored to succeed doesn't mean that you just are making the right move in order to take that shot. You should be stacking the odds in your favor as best as you possibly can, and something like this, where I'm just taking pot shots, is something that is going to not be successful a lot of the time. In the Steel Phalanx Big Boy list, I know this for a fact. I know that Phoenix just should not be shooting with his heavy rocket launcher unless I can be doing something else with the orders. In that case, yeah, sure, maybe I can move someone up, move Ajax closer. But in this particular list, I spent 2 or 3 orders with the Harris just sitting there in the middle, not moving anyone, not hitting anything, and not winning the face-to-face. The lesson, therefore, is instead of blaming my dice, which sort of was what I did, I instead should have switched pieces and used the Suryat and dealt with that. So that was the mistake. The only thing I can really say in my defense is that the Suryat Lieutenant was down here next to the target, and I wanted him to be there next to the target, and so I didn't want to move him up to take the shot, but really that's a dumb excuse because it just wasted so many orders trying to shoot this thing. Having finally killed the Kiroshi Rider and not much else, I was then able to spend the 2 lieutenant orders on the Suryat trying to synchronize the civilian. I did have 2 or 3 orders regular left after that with which to run away, but it didn't matter because I failed twice in a row with the lieutenant order trying to synchronize the civilian. That really was bad luck. I mean, it is possible for it to happen where you fail twice in a row, but on the back of all those failed armor saves, I think I can be fairly justified in being tilted at my dice. I did want to kill the Kiroshi Rider first. I think that was the right target. Obviously, I should have used the HMG and we would have been done way sooner. But as it stands, I will be leaving that designated target just sitting right there. And there are so many objective points wrapped up in having the designated target right there. This failure will give my opponent a chance to kill the designated target on the 3rd turn of the game. It doesn't succeed, but it could have lost me the game or made the game much more complicated for me based on this mistake or based on these bad dice. That said, having failed twice with the lieutenant order, I realized that I do not have the time to try a 3rd time because I wouldn't have enough orders to get him out of there. So I put my Suryat basically where this X is, the heavy rocket launcher guy, in a defensive position. I move my lieutenant back to here, and I get Kerr now over here. During that process, I also dump some pitchers down. I dump a pitcher here, I dump a pitcher here, and then I also dump a pitcher right next to my designated target. The second 2 pitchers that I thrown, the one here on the bridge and the one next to the designated target, these are pitchers that I want to talk about. Specifically, the purpose of both of these pitchers is to prevent my opponent from walking through with camo markers. You are not allowed to squeeze past enemy markers and stuff like that. As soon as you touch them, you enter close combat. And so by putting that pitcher on the bridge and by putting that pitcher blocking the HVT spot, my opponent will not be able to move ninjas into CC without first somehow dealing with the pitcher. In my opinion, this is kind of a bad faith play because it's like putting a Wi-Fi router next to someone and being like, oh, you can't walk past. But it is definitely how the rules work. At least it's my understanding that it's how the rules work. I've seen this done in a number of games, and so I'm doing it here as a defensive measure. So I set up the Suryat, I drop some pitchers in order to make it so my opponent has to deal with them before he can walk past them, and then I just end my turn. Yeah, here you can see where those pitchers are. One right here preventing CC, one right here, and it's not necessarily easy to tell, but you can't fit a guy on either side of it because of where it's placed. Here's my opponent's position at the end of their turn 2, but it's actually pretty similar to the start of my opponent's turn 2 because not a lot has happened. In this turn 2, my opponent more or less makes exactly the same mistake that I had made. In other words, he takes face-to-face rolls that are either not favored or only mildly favored, and does not win them with enough aplomb in order to actually put a lot of wounds on my Suryat, and my Suryat is just able to tank lots of armor saves. The Suryat is right here. He's not guarding all that much, but he is doing an okay job at stopping any advances. It's hard to tell. He is shutting down Yojimbo's run because he can see over here, and he is preventing anyone from moving past this line or moving past this line. So it is kind of a problem for the Suryat to be standing there. But the amount of resources that my opponent throws at the Suryat trying to take him out and the amount of saves that I make while defending is sort of exactly the same mistake that I had made trying to blast the Kiroshi Rider. First, he takes the Ryukin, who is here, runs down to here in order to take the gunfight. He's actually out of cover in order to take that gunfight, but he's got surprise, so it's BS12 versus BS7 or something like that. Burst 2, I tank all the hits and break line of fire. He then tries to use this Tanko with a Flammenspier. I can't hit anything, but I tank all the hits that hit me. He then tries to use his Damaru. This is burst 5 on 6s because of bad range and cover versus me burst 2 on 13s. That one I do win the face-to-face and take out his Damaru. He then takes his Mushashi Harris with the Tanko, runs over here, and again just tries to blitz in the Suryat. The Suryat does not win the face-to-face roll, but he manages to tank all of the saves. And ultimately, all of these are just burst 2, burst 3, not that overwhelmingly high ballistic skill, not that incredibly damaging ammo types. I mean, a Flammenspier is only damage 14, and I'm just able to tank every one of the few hits that get through. So this is lucky for me, but it is also the kind of mistake that I had just made while shooting at the Kiroshi Rider, because none of these were situations in which the numbers were super duper stacked up to make it likely in order to hurt the Suryat. Frankly, I think given the circumstances, a better play probably would have been to just take this Ryukin, run it up to here, and shoot my designated target with a heavy rocket launcher. I don't think there's anything that I could have done to stop that, and it would have been a really good play because it would, get that 5-point swing. Even so, I'm not sure that it's clear to my opponent at that time that this is something that he can do. There happens to be a window right here which allows him to see the target, but neither I nor my opponent realized that until turn 3. So we're both playing kind of dumb. And we're both making the same sorts of mistakes, but these are mistakes that are seriously worth thinking about. Both of us would have been far better served by stopping what we were doing and stopping getting tilted at the dice and instead focusing and saying, what should we be doing and what is the high likelihood chance of it working? And bringing up that point is mostly why I'm making this battle report. Anyway, that does end the turn. Not a lot happens except for he loses his Demaro. On my turn, I'm realizing that I have got to push some buttons and get some kills. I could try to run my guy back to further safety, but I don't think that that's the winning strategy here. There are 3 buttons to push, and the Ryukin are going to be a problem. Fortunately, my opponent has moved this Ryukin away from his commanding position, which means that both this console and this console are up for grabs. What I do is I take this Harris right here with Kurnow, who's a hacker in it. I run over here to the center. I gunfight this Tanko over here. I think I again used the heavy rocket launcher for some reason. I have evidently not learned my lesson. And I gunfight that guy, and it doesn't work. I then decide that I'm sick and tired of not hitting anything, so I decide to use Kurnow. Kurnow plasma rifles this Tanko and just utterly wastes him. Kurnow also is able to waste this Tanko. If I'd gotten unlucky and lost Kurnow, I would have been pretty unhappy, but I don't get unlucky. And a burst 4 on 12s, I mean, the odds are sort of in my favor, especially since these guys are down to like contenders and SMGs. So I don't think this is terribly good luck. To get these face-to-face, it's a risky play. It's a bad move. I push the button. I then press further into here because I have revealed that target. It's a decoy, but I want to kill it. I kill it with Kurnow, and then I just run back to essentially this position. I think Kurnow is prone over here, and the Suryat heavy rocket launcher is defensive again. Once again, I have essentially not spent any orders at all on the tag Harris, which is sort of the point of this list, but I am busy getting work done with my other thing, and most importantly, this Harris cannot deal with these Ryukin. So I am using the Suryat Harris because they can handle the Ryukin if they get revealed. I never gunfight the Ryukin at all, but I'm just kind of thinking if I do have to gunfight them, I want to do it with my Suryats rather than with poor Norkius and his Breaker Combi rifle. And yeah, here's how things look at the end of the turn. I have pushed a button. I have killed a designated target there. I've taken out a couple of orders. I think I actually do manage to put this Chai-Yi flashball spot in the ground with my heavy rocket launcher. And I end up with the heavy rocket launcher is there defensively, the HMG is there defensively, and Kurnow is there. That brings us to my opponent's turn 3. He has been waiting all game to unleash his ninja on my target. And seeing that it's the 3rd turn, it is time to go. The ninja is here, and he takes the ninja and runs out to this position. It is once he gets there that we both realize there is a window, and it is also once he gets there that he realizes that he will not be able to CC my designated target because the pitcher is in the way. I did announce that that's what I was doing when I put it there, but nevertheless, it's something that he realizes by the time he gets there. I don't think he spends too many orders like running out and then like having to run back. I think I let them take them back, but it is still something that is problematic for him. So instead, he is basically left with trying to shoot the designated target. And the weapon that he has available to him is a tactical bow. As this is happening, of course, I am sweating. My opponent has plenty of orders with which to try and take shots. I can't see him, and my target is not in cover. However, a tactical bow is only burst 1. It is silent, a fact which I actually am only now realizing, but silent only matters if he wastes the target. If the target survives, everyone can arrow like normal. Lastly, this is the Ninja Killer Hacker, and he is in repeater range. So if he takes the shot, and if he misses, then I have 3 Trinities that are going to fry his brains because he's thoroughly in repeater range, and he will not have a second shot at this. And as it happens, I roll an 8 on my dodge, which is a crit because of the surprise attack, and my opponent rolls a 20 on his tactical bow, which is a miss. 3 Trinities come in, his brain is fried, my designated target survives, and in many ways, this is the resolution of the game. So I will say the odds of him hitting versus me dodging and maybe me surviving because I could tank the 2 hits, I don't think that the odds of that are higher than 10 or 20%, so I did get very lucky in this particular case. And so I am willing to forgive my Suryat for failing his 2 rolls to synchronize the civilian. That having been said, the Ninja Killer Hacker is not the right tool for this job. If it had been the Ninja with an SMG or a combi rifle or anything with an actual gun, or Saito, for example, this designated target would have been super duper dead. So I didn't lose the game, but that was only because I got lucky and because my opponent didn't bring the right tool for the right situation. My opponent then realizes that he's not going to be able to kill my guy, and he hunkers down defensively. But even with that hunkering down defensively, I am still going to be able to pull things back. I am going to take this Harris. I have to kill Yojimbo, who walked out defensively. There was a Ryukin who was able to take pot shots at me, but I use my Suryat heavy rocket launcher to basically be arrow bait. So he keeps shooting at the Suryat heavy rocket launcher, and as that happens, I allow Kurnow to run over here. We kill Yojimbo. We push this button, and we reveal the designated target that is hidden behind this building. That turns out to be the real one, and it is now my go to try to kill the guy. At first, luck is not with me. I move this Suryat down here in order to take some rocket launcher shots. I get 3 hits, and my opponent tanks all 3 of them. There's also a ninja that appears around here, but I am able to fry its brains with Kurnow. Again, I mean, it's just a killer hacker. And the last thing I am able to do, I do get my Suryat HMG up here during that process. I am using my orders more effectively here because I am moving and gunfighting, so I'm getting some movement out of it. And what I do is I spend those lieutenant orders and I run over to here. And during the last order of the game, I do gunfight this guy and burst 4 on like 16s or 13s or something like that. I do win the face-to-face. I do put that guy in the ground. So even had my opponent killed my designated target, I still would have won the game because I killed his designated target in the end. But, I mean, there was only a 50-50 chance that I guessed the right designated target. I guessed that one because it was easier to kill, and the fact that it happened to be the right one is pure coincidence. I did get unreasonably unlucky while shooting that thing on one of the 2 orders, but once again, we are left with the fact that the Suryat heavy rocket launcher is only putting a handful of hits onto something, and the template does not matter if your opponent is 1 wound and out of cover. One minor note, during this last order, while I was able to take out the designated target, the 2 Ryukin and the Tenko were able to shoot at my Suryat, and my Suryat was super duper killed. I personally count that as a win. The Morats love to die in battle, so I did give him that opportunity, but it is something my opponent was able to do. And yeah, that pretty much concludes the game. Both of us were, I think, making similar mistakes where we were taking low burst, low damage guns in gunfights that we really shouldn't have. Both me and my opponent got lucky in the sense that given that circumstance, we didn't lose any of our armor saves. Right, because failing any single one of those armor saves would, potentially have resolved the situation, and we just tanked everything. We both were kind of space cadets. We didn't really notice windows until the last second. We played with a bridge off the whole game. And in a lot of ways, the game did come down to luck because of the failure to, defend things as well as they needed to be defended. That having been said, part of the reason I took the Suryat heavy rocket launcher is because I wanted him to be a tanky ARO piece that could see through smoke. That is exactly what he did. He was tanky. He didn't have to see through smoke, but he was able to shoot at things with mimetism, so that kind of counts. And I won the game in many ways because on turn 2, my opponent hurled everything he could at the Suryat, and the Suryat was able to take it like a champion. So I think, Blender Boys, this particular iteration with the Suryat Harris deserves a lot of credit for the win. I think the dice deserve a lot of credit for creating these bizarre situations. I think I was not playing at my best. But I hope the way in which I was playing badly and the way in which I've talked about it has provided some insight into your games when you play infiNity. Specifically, even if you're favored to win a face-to-face roll, you've got to look at the odds in which you are going to hurt your opponent. And if the odds aren't really stacking everything in your advantage, then sometimes the dice are just going to say, no, you don't do anything with this face-to-face, and that's going to be a wasted order. This game provides many examples of that fact, and I hope it is instructive for you in the future. Thanks for watching, and I will hope to see you again soon.